I still remember the exact second I realized something was wrong because the night suddenly felt crowded even though I was completely alone. I was driving north on an empty highway that barely showed up on my GPS anymore. The kind of road that feels forgotten, where the asphalt looks older than the trees around it. It was past midnight. No moon. Just my headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the dark, and the soft hum of the tires trying to keep me awake. I hadn't seen another car for almost an hour, and at first that felt peaceful, like the world had finally stopped bothering me. Then I noticed the silence wasn't normal. It wasn't quiet the way open roads usually are. There were no crickets, no wind in the trees, not even the distant sound of a truck miles away. It felt like the night itself was holding its breath, like something was waiting for me to notice it. I turned the radio on just to break that feeling, but all I got was static, thick and uneven, like whispering trapped inside a box. I switched stations again and again. Nothing but static. That alone wasn't scary, but the static felt close. Like it was inside the car with me instead of coming from the speakers. That was when I saw the gas station lights. They appeared suddenly, glowing pale and sickly on the side of the road, like they'd been turned on just for me. A single station. One pump. One small building with dark windows. No other cars. No signs of life. My fuel gauge was sitting just above empty, and even though every instinct told me not to stop, the idea of running out of gas out there felt worse. I pulled in slowly, my headlights sweeping across the cracked pavement. As soon as I stopped the engine, the silence got heavier. I stepped out of the car, and the air felt wrong. Too still, too thick. The lights above the pump flickered, not fast, but slow and uneven, like they were struggling to stay awake. When I grabbed the nozzle, it was cold in a way metal shouldn't be. I remember thinking it felt like something that had been underground for a long time. While the tank filled, I glanced at the building. That's when I noticed the door was open just a little, not wide open, just enough to show darkness inside. No bell rang, no music, no movement. I told myself the clerk must be in the back. I told myself a lot of things that night to avoid listening to the quiet panic crawling up my spine. When the pump clicked off, the sound was so loud it made me flinch. I put the nozzle back and stood there for a second, debating whether I really needed to go inside. I didn't want snacks. I didn't want a receipt. I just wanted to leave. And then I heard someone breathe behind me. It wasn't close enough to feel on my neck, but it was close enough that I could hear the shape of it. Slow, controlled, like they were trying not to be heard. I turned around fast, my heart hammering, but there was no one there. Just my car, the road, the dark trees lining the edge of the station like a wall. I laughed under my breath, embarrassed at myself, but the sound of my own voice felt wrong too, like it didn't belong out there. I got back in the car, locked the doors, and started the engine. The moment I pulled away, the station lights shut off behind me. All of them. At once. I told myself it was on a timer. I told myself it was nothing. But I didn't look back again. The road stretched on, darker than before, and that feeling of being watched came back stronger. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting headlights. But there was nothing. Still, every so often I caught movement just at the edge of my vision. Shadows where shadows shouldn't be. Shapes that slipped away the second I tried to focus on them. About 20 minutes later, I saw a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker. That thought alone made my chest tighten. Nobody hitchhikes out there. Not at that hour. As I got closer, I realized the figure wasn't moving at all. Not waving, not turning its head, just standing there, facing the road, arms hanging loosely at its sides. I slowed down despite myself. The headlights washed over the figure and my stomach dropped. It was a man. At least it looked like one. He was tall, wearing dark clothes that seemed to absorb the light instead of reflecting it. His face was tilted slightly downward, hidden in shadow. As I passed him, his head lifted slowly, just enough that I could see his eyes. They were open too wide. Not shocked, not angry, just open. Like he was trying to see something behind me instead of me. I sped up, my hands shaking on the wheel, and when I checked the mirror, he was gone. Not walking away, not running. Just gone, like he'd never been there at all. That was when my phone rang. The sound made me nearly swerve off the road. I glanced at the screen. No caller ID, just a black screen with white letters. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The ringing stopped after a few seconds, and immediately the radio turned on by itself. No static this time. A voice came through, low and calm, like someone speaking from another room. It wasn't a song. It wasn't a broadcast I recognized. It sounded like a man reading something slowly, carefully, but I couldn't make out the words. The voice faded in and out, like it was struggling to stay connected, and underneath it, I thought I heard something else. A second voice, quieter, closer. I reached to turn the radio off, and it stopped on its own. The road sign ahead told me there was a motel 5 miles up. I don't remember deciding to stop there. I just remember feeling like I couldn't keep driving forever, like the road was starting to loop back on itself somehow. When I reached the motel, it looked old but intact. One long building, 2 stories. Most of the rooms were dark, but a few lights were on, glowing dimly through thin curtains. The parking lot was empty except for my car. Inside the office, a single lamp sat on the counter, casting long shadows across the walls. A man stood behind the desk, completely still, staring down at a ledger. He didn't look up when I walked in. I waited. The silence stretched. Finally, I cleared my throat. Slowly, the man raised his head. His smile came first, too slow, too wide. His eyes followed, locking onto mine with an intensity that made me feel like I'd just stepped into something I couldn't step out of. He slid a key across the counter without asking my name, without asking for payment, and said in a voice that felt practiced, like he'd said it many times before, "Second floor, end of the hall. You'll hear them if you listen." I didn't ask what he meant. I took the key and left. The hallway outside my room smelled like dust and something faintly rotten. The carpet muffled my footsteps too well, like it was trying to swallow the sound. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the room was already cold, even though the heater was on. The bed looked slept in. The TV was on, playing static. I stood there, frozen, when I heard it. A soft knock. Not on my door. On the wall behind the bed. Once. Then again. Then a slow dragging sound, like fingers moving along the other side of the wall, searching for something. I backed away, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The knocking stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then a voice whispered my name. I had never told anyone at that motel my name, and that was only the beginning. The whisper didn't come again, at least not immediately. I just stood there, frozen, the hairs on my arms standing up, every muscle screaming to run but my feet rooted to the carpet. I could hear my own breathing, loud and shallow in the silence, and the faint hum of the heater sounded like it had suddenly grown teeth. Then the wall shifted. Not physically, but the air around it moved, like the room had tilted slightly, like gravity had decided to skip one corner. I could hear faint scratching now under the whispers, as if someone, or something, was moving inside the walls, right behind the plaster. My eyes darted to the bed, and for the first time I noticed the shadows. They weren't normal. They stretched too far across the room, reaching corners they shouldn't have, bending around corners in ways light can't bend. I sat on the edge of the bed, telling myself I was imagining it. Telling myself I'd just been driving too long, running on no sleep, my mind playing tricks. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. My instincts were screaming at me. Something was here. Something was waiting. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time stopped feeling real. Every sound was amplified. The flicker of the TV static, the soft groan of the old building settling, the faint scraping behind the wall. Sometimes it sounded like claws, sometimes like fingernails dragging across concrete. I wanted to cover my ears, to run, but I didn't. Something kept me there, staring, listening. And then the door opened, not unlocked, not forced, just opened. A slow creak, like it had been waiting decades to move again. I froze, my throat dry, my hands trembling. I could see a figure in the doorway, just a shadow at first, and I told myself I must have been imagining it, but then it stepped forward. Not fully, not like a person exactly, more like a shape. It moved smoothly, silently, and I couldn't look away. Its face was hidden, always just out of focus, and yet somehow I knew it was looking at me, watching me, studying me. I tried to speak. I wanted to scream. I couldn't. My voice wouldn't come. It started to whisper, low, slow, repeating something I couldn't understand at first. But the words grew clearer the longer it stood there, and suddenly, it was repeating my fears back to me, my private thoughts I had never said out loud, the deepest, darkest ones. I stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the bed, and the shadow moved closer, bending around the corners like it wasn't limited by walls. And then I saw it. Its hands. Long, impossibly thin, stretching unnaturally, twisting in ways human hands cannot. And from the shadow it cast, I could see more figures, hundreds, maybe thousands, pressing against walls that weren't there, whispering my name, laughing quietly, softly, their voices scratching at the edges of my mind. I ran. I didn't care about the door, the stairs, the elevator. I ran through the hallway, the carpet muffling everything but the pounding of my own heartbeat. Lights flickered as I passed, and every room I saw through cracked doors was filled with figures like the one in my room, watching, waiting, smiling. All of them silent until I passed, and then their whispering would fill the hallway, soft but insistent. When I reached the parking lot, I didn't stop to look back. I didn't check the car. I just drove, fast, over the cracked asphalt, the old motel disappearing behind me like it had never existed. But the feeling followed me. Even with the highway stretching empty in front of me, I could feel them in the shadows, crawling at the edge of my vision, pressing against the glass. Hours passed. I don't know how long. The road twisted, turning into places I didn't recognize, signs that I didn't remember seeing. I tried calling someone, anyone. The phone only rang inside my pocket, never outside. When I tried to call 911, the line was silent, except for my own voice echoing back to me. Then I saw it again. The figure, standing in the middle of the highway. Same posture, same eyes. Watching. I swerved around it, heart hammering, and my tires skidded off the asphalt into the gravel, throwing up sparks and dust. When I looked again, the figure was closer, not walking, not running, just closer. I felt it in my chest, pressing, pushing, like the space around me was shrinking, like the air itself was turning into walls. I tried to blink it away. Tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, sleep deprivation, nerves. But then I realized the road behind me wasn't empty anymore. Shadows formed there too, filling the highway like a dark river. Silent shapes that didn't belong in reality. And I understood. They weren't going to let me leave. I don't know how long I drove. Days, maybe. Weeks or hours stretched like eternities. Every gas station I stopped at was empty. Every motel was occupied by silence. Every car I saw had someone in the passenger seat, looking at me, never blinking. Every time I tried to pull over and rest, the whispering would start again, soft at first, then loud, relentless, repeating my name, asking questions I didn't want to answer, telling me to turn around, to look, to stop, to stay. I can't explain how I ended up in the woods. One turn, one exit, one choice I didn't make, and suddenly I was surrounded by trees, Thick, black, impossible to see through, yet somehow the shadows were there too. They moved between the trunks, hiding, waiting. Every snap of a branch sounded like a footstep. Every rustle of leaves sounded like breathing. Then I found it. A clearing, and in the center, a figure sitting on a stump. Not moving, not breathing. I knew it was me, or something wearing me, or something that knew everything about me. And around it, hundreds of smaller figures pressed in, whispering, scratching, pointing. Their eyes were hollow, but somehow I could feel their gaze like fingers on my skin. I didn't run. I couldn't. My body froze, but my mind raced. I wanted to scream, to wake up, to forget, to disappear. And then the wind changed, carrying something I had never heard before, a soft, melodic humming, low and distant, like a lullaby I had forgotten I knew. But every note carried a weight, a message I couldn't understand, something that told me I had crossed a line, and there was no returning. I blinked. When my eyes opened again, I was alone. The clearing was empty, the shadows gone. The road ahead looked normal. The trees were normal. Even the air felt lighter, almost safe. Almost. Because as I drove out of those woods, I noticed something on the back window of my car. A handprint. Just one. Wet, black, impossible to explain. And every so often, I feel it watching me again. Always there. In mirrors. In reflections. In the corner of my vision. Waiting, smiling, whispering my name. And I know. I will never be alone again. I could feel it again before I even realized it. The presence. That weight on the air that presses against your chest like the night itself is alive and breathing down your neck. I tried to tell myself it was just nerves, that my mind was playing tricks after so many hours on the road, but it wasn't. Something was moving with me, always just at the edge of my vision, a flicker between trees, a shadow that didn't belong, something that followed my every step. I stopped at the next gas station I saw, or maybe it wasn't a station. Everything seemed like a copy of something else I'd seen, the same flickering fluorescent lights, the same cracked asphalt, the same lonely pump with no one inside. I tried to step out of the car just to stretch, just to feel real, but the instant I did, I heard it again. That low, soft whisper crawling over the air like fingers over glass, repeating my name, slow, deliberate, mocking. I spun around. Nothing. But I felt it, cold, heavy, watching from the trees, from the shadows, from the corners of the world that weren't there a second ago. I forced myself back into the car. I drove without thinking. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. I couldn't tell. Every turn in the road seemed familiar but wrong, like the road was alive and twisting beneath me. And every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I could swear I saw figures walking, silently, keeping pace. But whenever I blinked, nothing was there. Eventually, I saw a building. A diner maybe, or a truck stop. The kind of place that should be open 24 hours. Its neon sign buzzed weakly, flickering between letters that didn't make sense. I wanted to stop, but I didn't. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight I could feel my fingernails biting into my palms. The closer I got, the more I felt like the building was watching me, studying me, learning me, waiting. Something moved inside. Not a person, not exactly. Just a shape, darker than the night outside, sliding along the windows, twisting behind the glass in ways that shouldn't be possible. My pulse hammered in my ears. I tried to scream, but my mouth was dry. I wanted to drive past, to get as far as possible, but my car slowed, as if it had a mind of its own, pulling me toward the entrance. Inside, the air was thick, musty, almost alive. I could hear whispers all around me, soft, low, like hundreds of people speaking in tongues I almost understood. The booths were empty, yet shadows shifted along the walls, stretching long, bending oddly. The jukebox was on, but it played no music, just a low, humming static, like voices under glass. And I heard it clearly this time, My name, again and again, carried on that static. I tried to leave. The doors wouldn't open. I pushed. I pulled. The handle was cold, impossibly cold, and it burned my hands when I touched it. And behind me, the shadows moved closer, pressing along the walls, whispering faster now, calling my fears, my regrets, my secrets back to me. I ran. Not out of bravery, but because there was no other choice. I burst through a side door, into an alley I didn't recognize, and the night was different here. The air was thicker, heavier, and I could see shapes moving in the corners of my eyes. But when I tried to focus, the shapes vanished. The ground under my feet was uneven, wet, sticky almost. But when I looked down, there was nothing. Nothing but the asphalt and my reflection, distorted, twisting in ways I didn't understand. And then I realized something worse. The whispers weren't outside anymore. They were inside the car. I hadn't left the car. I couldn't leave the car. Every time I looked up, the road stretched empty and wrong, curving in ways that didn't make sense. And in the rearview mirror, I could see figures sitting in the back seat. Not fully formed, just shapes. Faces that shifted, twisted. Eyes that never blinked. And the whispers grew louder, repeating the same sentence over and over, until I understood the words, not with my ears, but in my mind. You can't leave. You never left. You will never leave. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded sideways, sparks flying, but when I looked up, the figures were gone. The road stretched on, empty, silent, almost peaceful, and I dared to hope, just for a second, that maybe I had shaken them off. Then I looked at the back window. A single handprint, black and wet, pressed there from the inside. I didn't move for a long time. I didn't breathe. I just sat there frozen, knowing that whatever was following me, whatever had been with me the whole time, was still there, waiting, watching, patient. And I realized something worse than fear, worse than the shadows, worse than the whispers. I could never escape it. I could drive for 1,000 miles, hide in every empty motel, every abandoned gas station, every forgotten road. It would follow, always. And one day, maybe, I would see the shape sitting in the passenger seat, smiling, whispering my name, waiting for me to understand what had been true all along. I had never been alone, not for a single moment, and I never would be. I didn't sleep after that. I don't think I could have even if I tried. Every time I closed my eyes, the darkness behind them felt thicker than the night outside, crowded with shapes pressing forward, waiting for me to look again. So I kept driving. The road felt endless, like it had forgotten where it was supposed to go, stretching forward in long, empty curves that all looked the same. My headlights carved out a narrow tunnel, and everything beyond that light felt alive, shifting, leaning closer when I wasn't looking directly at it. At some point, I realized I hadn't seen a mile marker in hours. No exits, no signs, just trees, dense and black, closing in tighter the farther I went, like the world was slowly shrinking around me. The fuel gauge dropped again, faster than it should have. I whispered out loud that I needed a place to stop, not even sure who I was talking to, and almost immediately the road bent sharply and opened into a small clearing. There was a rest area there. It looked wrong from the start. The sign was old and rusted, the letters so faded they were barely readable, and the parking lot lights glowed a dim yellow, like they were sick. There were cars parked there, but none of them looked recently used. Flat tires, fogged windows, doors slightly open. I pulled in anyway, my body moving on instinct, my mind screaming at me to keep going. When I stepped out of the car, the air hit me like a wall. It smelled damp and old, like wet earth and decay. The forest around the rest area was completely silent. No wind, no insects. Even my footsteps sounded wrong, muffled and distant, like they didn't fully belong to me. I could feel eyes on my back the entire time, heavy and unblinking. The bathroom building stood at the edge of the clearing, concrete walls stained dark by years of moisture. One light flickered above the door, buzzing softly. I told myself I just needed water, just needed to splash my face, remind myself I was real. The door creaked open when I pushed it, the sound echoing far longer than it should have. Inside, the air was colder. The fluorescent lights hummed unevenly, and the mirrors along the wall were cloudy, warped. I stood at one of the sinks and turned the handle. The water came out brown at first, then slowly cleared. I leaned forward, splashing my face, gripping the edge of the sink to steady myself. When I looked up, my reflection didn't move right away. It stood there for half a second longer than it should have, staring back at me with an expression I wasn't making. Its eyes looked tired, empty. And behind it, in the reflection, I could see shapes filling the bathroom, crowding the space behind me, their faces pressed close together, mouths open in silent whispers. I spun around. The room was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, my reflection was normal again. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. Like it was learning me, memorizing me. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding, and that's when I heard footsteps outside. Slow. Careful. Dragging slightly like whoever was walking didn't quite know how. The door opened. A man stepped inside, tall and thin, wearing clothes that looked decades old. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were too dark, like light couldn't reach them. He didn't look at me at first. He walked to the sink next to mine and began washing his hands, moving slowly, deliberately. The sound of the water filled the room, too loud, too sharp. "You shouldn't stay here," he said softly, without turning his head. My throat tightened. "Why not?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, and I saw it in the mirror. Not a friendly smile, not even a cruel one. It was empty. "Because they notice when you stop moving," he said. I felt cold spread through my chest. "Who?" He finally looked at me then, and in his eyes I saw the same darkness I'd seen on the road, the same watching presence. "You already know," he said. The lights flickered. When they steadied again, he was gone. No sound, no door opening, just gone. The bathroom felt smaller now, the walls closer, the air thicker. I rushed out, my footsteps echoing behind me, and nearly collided with someone standing just outside the door. It was a woman, or something shaped like one. Her face was wrong, like it had been stretched over her skull too tightly, her eyes too far apart. She stared at me with an expression that almost looked curious. Almost. "You can still hear them, can't you?" she asked gently. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Her smile widened slowly. "That means you're not finished yet." I ran. I didn't look back. I threw myself into the car, slammed the door, and locked it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I sped out of the rest area, tires screeching. In the mirror, I saw figures stepping out from between the trees, dozens of them, maybe more, standing shoulder to shoulder, watching me leave. None of them moved. None of them waved. The road swallowed me again. But something had changed. I could feel it. The whispers were closer now, clearer, like they weren't coming from outside anymore. Like they were inside my head, finishing my thoughts, answering questions I hadn't asked yet. I started to realize the truth slowly, painfully, like a wound opening 1 inch at a time. This wasn't a chase. It was a process. Every stop, every road, every face I met was another step, another layer being peeled away. And somewhere ahead of me I knew there was a place I was meant to reach, a place where the road would finally end. And deep down, beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, I felt something else growing. Recognition. I don't know when I stopped trying to escape and started trying to understand. Maybe it happened without me noticing, the same way the night kept changing without ever announcing itself. The road felt narrower now, like it was guiding me instead of simply existing. The trees leaned inward, their branches clawing at the darkness above, knitting it together until the sky was nothing but a thin black seam overhead. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were conversations. Sometimes they sounded like people I knew. Sometimes they sounded like me. They talked about things I hadn't thought about in years. Moments I'd buried so deep I thought they were gone forever. Regrets, anger, guilt, things I never apologized for, things I never fixed. Every mile forward felt like something else being dragged out of me, exposed to the cold air of that endless night. I saw another sign eventually. It came out of nowhere, rising from the darkness like it had been waiting for me. The letters were crooked, half missing, but I could still read it. A town name I didn't recognize. The arrow pointed straight ahead. No other directions, just forward. I told myself I wouldn't stop. I said it out loud, gripping the wheel. But the road dipped downward, and suddenly I was there. The town sat low, like it had sunk into the ground over time. One main street, a few buildings, streetlights that glowed weakly, their light barely touching the pavement. It looked abandoned, but I could feel movement everywhere, just beyond the reach of my eyes. I slowed without meaning to. The first thing I noticed was how clean everything looked. No trash, no broken windows, no signs of decay. It felt preserved, like a memory someone refused to let fade. As I drove through the town, every house I passed had lights on inside, warm and inviting, curtains drawn tight. I couldn't see anyone through the windows, but I knew they were there, watching, waiting to be noticed. My car stalled in the middle of the street. The engine cut out so suddenly my head snapped forward. I tried to restart it. Nothing. The silence pressed in immediately, thick and heavy. The streetlights flickered, and for a moment, every house went dark at the same time. Then the lights came back on, slowly, one by one. Doors began to open. People stepped out onto their porches. Men, women, children, all of them standing perfectly still, faces turned toward me. They didn't wave, they didn't speak. They just watched. I felt my chest tighten, my breath coming shallow. I stepped out of the car, my legs shaky, and the sound of my door closing echoed through the town like a gunshot. Someone clapped, just once. The sound came from somewhere behind me. When I turned, an older man stood a few feet away, smiling kindly, like a neighbor greeting someone new. His eyes were bright, too bright for the rest of his face. "You made it," he said. "I didn't mean to stop," I replied. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. "No one ever does," he said gently. "But you always end up here." I felt a cold crawl up my spine. Where is this place? He tilted his head slightly, considering. "It's where the road takes you when it runs out of pretending." The people on the porches began to step closer. Their movements were slow, careful, almost respectful. As they walked, I noticed something wrong about them. Their shadows didn't match their bodies. Some were too long, some bent at sharp angles. Some moved even when the person stood still. "You can rest now," the man said. "You've been moving for a long time." "I don't want to stay," I said, backing away. He nodded, still smiling. "No one ever does at first." A woman stepped out from the crowd, her face familiar in a way I couldn't place. As she got closer, I realized why. She looked like someone I used to know. Not exactly, but close enough to make my chest ache. Her eyes filled with something like sadness. "We kept the lights on for you," she said softly. The street seemed to stretch, the buildings leaning inward, closing the space around me. I could hear the whispers again, louder now, coming from every direction. They weren't mocking anymore. They sounded patient, encouraging. "Just listen," the old man said. "You've already heard us. That means you belong to the part of the world that notices." My head throbbed. Memories surged forward, moments from my life replaying in fragments, overlapping, bleeding into one another. Times I'd felt watched before. Times I'd felt like something was wrong but kept going anyway. Times I'd chosen the road instead of staying, moving instead of facing things. The realization hit me slowly, like dawn breaking over a long, terrible night. The road hadn't trapped me. It had recognized me. The town lights flickered again, and this time they didn't come back as bright. The people stopped a few steps away, forming a loose circle. No one touched me. They didn't need to. I could feel them inside my head now, calm and steady, like a chorus humming just below hearing. "You can leave," the woman said. I looked up at her sharply. She smiled sadly. "But if you do, you'll hear us forever. You'll see us in reflections, in empty roads, in quiet rooms at night. Or you can stay, and the road won't call to you anymore." I looked back at my car. It sat dark and silent, already feeling distant, unreal. I looked at the town, at the people who weren't quite people, at the shadows that moved on their own. I don't remember making a decision. I remember the streetlights dimming. I remember the whispers softening into something almost comforting. I remember the road behind me fading, like it had never existed at all. And sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet and the world feels thin, I wonder if you've driven that road too. Because every so often, someone new arrives in town. And when they do, all the lights turn on at once. Days, weeks, or maybe years passed. I don't know anymore. Time doesn't work the same way here. The town doesn't change. The people don't change. I wander its streets, sometimes alone, sometimes surrounded, and the whispers never stop. They're softer now, calmer, like a lullaby I can't escape. They know me. They know everything I ever thought, everything I ever feared, everything I ever hid from the world. And I know them too, in a way I can't describe. They're part of me now. And I'm part of them. Sometimes I see headlights on the road outside, faint and flickering, and I know someone else is coming. The street lights buzz weakly and welcome, the doors open slowly, and the town waits. I hear the road calling them, the way it called me, the way it always calls. And I remember the look of that man in the woods, the hand on my car window, the shapes that move just out of sight. They're patient. They wait. They always wait. I walk among the people now, but not quite with them. They smile, and I smile. They whisper, and I whisper. Every so often, a new arrival stumbles into town, terrified, exhausted, haunted by the road and the shadows it hides. I watch them from the edge of the street, feeling the weight of the whispers in my own mind. Some scream, some run, and some freeze in place, eyes wide and staring. The town welcomes all of them eventually. There's nowhere else for anyone to go. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the wind carries just the faintest hum of the road that no longer exists, I think I hear it again. A soft, insistent whisper in the back of my mind. My name, my real name. From far away, from somewhere I can't see. The road is still calling. It always will. I look at the newcomers, their faces pale and fearful, their eyes wide with the same recognition I once had. And I smile, because I know what they don't yet understand. The road never truly ends. The shadows never leave. The whispers never stop. And in the deepest part of the night I hear the one thought I can't escape, over and over, echoing in every corner of my mind. You never left. You will never leave. And now, neither will they. The streetlights flicker one last time before the darkness swallows everything. And the road waits. Forever.